She barely glanced in my direction as she burst into the kitchen. Even a simple hello or a familiar smile would have been nice. But she just adjusted her dress, looked over her shoulder anxiously, and said, "Don't forget, I'm with my friends tonight. I have my cell phone, but don't call unless it's urgent." I looked at her before answering. I wondered how she could expect me to believe that her tight black dress was meant for girls. Or the makeup, or the perfume. Did she really expect me to believe that girls like it when girls look like that? I should have been offended that she thought so little of me. I should have been offended that she allowed herself to be so ignorant. But I wasn't offended because I knew I deserved it. After all, she had managed to hide her other relationships from me for much longer than she should have. I was the worst kind of fool, the kind who trusts others, the kind who lets others into their life, the kind who bets their life on them. The mistake had been made, the mistake had been acknowledged, and now the mistake had been corrected. "Before you go," I finally said, "I want you to sit down for a minute so we can talk." She didn't even turn around, just snorted impatiently, rummaged through her purse and said, "I'm sorry, honey, but I really have to go. I'm already late." I tensed, expecting an outburst of anger, clenching the beer bottle tightly, but nothing happened. No anger, no rage, no resentment. Such indifferent disregard was all too typical of her behavior lately. She had dismissed me. She had dismissed the children. She had dismissed herself. And now we were all used to it. But not anymore. It was time to act. I threw the keys she was looking for on the table. "I understand you need to hurry," I said sharply. "God knows I do. But if you leave and spend another evening entertaining Carl Jensen without talking to me, I suggest you don't come back here." She froze, standing there with her hand in her purse for a long time, but said nothing. "What?" she finally said in a thin, incredulous voice. "What did you say?" "It won't take more than a minute," I said. "Sit down with me at the table and let's talk." She lingered for another minute, not turning around or responding to my offer. She clutched her purse as if it could save her life. But it didn't help. Finally, her shoulders slumped, her arms fell, and she turned around. She looked guilty in every way except for her eyes. They darted around the room like a wounded and hopeless animal. Staggering, she half sat, half leaning against the chair across from me. She glanced quickly in my direction many times, trying to find an answer in my eyes, but she didn't find it. "John," she finally said, I... I'm sorry." Her voice was barely audible. God, did she really hope to win with such a trivial thing as remorse? How lazy you are! "What are you sorry for?" I asked, pretending to be surprised. "I can't wait to hear what you've done that you think can be fixed with an apology." She bit her lip. Looking down at the table, she ran her finger across the surface, drawing patterns in the wood. "I don't think it will change anything. I know what a mess I've made, even if you don't believe it, but if anything, I'm sorry for what happened." That was it. I smiled. "Be magnanimous, be calm. The first step was mine. Thank you for respecting me and not lying to my face," I said honestly. "Not that it matters. No lie would have saved you from the truth, I know. But it makes me think that maybe I made the right decision not to leave." She paled slightly. "You're not leaving? I... I don't want you to leave," she whispered. "I don't love him, John. I honestly don't love him. I raised my hand to silence her. When I saw that she was ready to act, a temptation rose in my chest. Don't hit her, no matter what. It would be so easy, so instantaneous. But if you start, you might not be able to stop. "I know you won't do it," I grimaced, letting her know how much that knowledge meant to me. "Or at least I know you think you won't. Either way, I've heard all your little excuses." "Heard?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well, you stupid No. Everything is going according to plan. Ignore the tension in your stomach. Remember what's at stake. You're doing great. Don't ruin it." "It's simple," I shrugged. "I heard you say it to him." If it was possible, she paled even more and fidgeted in her chair. You heard us?" I just stared at her, keeping a calm expression, and she looked away. Her eyes were wet. Brilliant was probably the most appropriate word. She took a deep breath. "What are you going to do? I know it seems like I don't love you right now, but I really do. And I don't want to lose what we have. I'll die if you leave." I nodded. "I know. Like I said, I heard you explain everything to him. No need to repeat yourself. I could have killed you, you know? At any one of 1,000 moments, I could have reached out and ended your story for you, but I didn't. Think about that. What that means. Leaning forward, I bent down and picked up the heavy envelope. Watching her reaction, I placed it on the table. It was bulging, ready to burst. I ran my hand over the top and patted it for effect. This envelope contains everything I know about your romance. She took a deep breath and looked at its thickness again, her eyes wide. I gave her a moment to take it all in during a long, cold, threatening minute. You can read it later. I won't hide anything from you and I'll try to be as honest as possible. I paused to rub my eyes with my index finger and thumb. Okay, deep breath. You've prepared everything. Now comes the hard part. She stared at the envelope as if it were a live cobra. It's so thick, she whispered. I nodded and stroked it again, enjoying the sound of my palm hitting the thick folder. Once I became suspicious and started investigating, it was surprisingly easy to gather information. You weren't trying very hard to hide it anymore, were you? I thought you trusted me. I thought I would be safe. I did trust you. And I trusted you. It will never happen again. She nodded quickly. And it won't. I'm sorry, John. Please give me a chance to make it up to you. If you agree to stay, I already told you, I muttered. I'm staying. And I won't try to chase you out. I know exactly where that would lead. No. If anyone's filing for divorce, it's going to be you. I ignored the surprised look on her face, carefully choosing my words and trying to separate meaning from reality. The truth was that it took me an hour with a lawyer, a day of searching the internet, and several weeks of soul-searching to figure out what I felt, what I had left to protect in my life, and what I needed to do to survive. Tonight was just the first step. I swallowed and continued. However, my staying here depends on one condition. Now I was speaking with the voice of a leader. Directly, sharply, decisively. I've thought about this a lot, and while it's obvious to me that you probably still love me, I can't get rid of my love for you just because it's become inconvenient. The possibility of us becoming a couple is now completely out of the question. She frowned and opened her mouth to respond, but I raised my hand. Your actions, the fact that you got involved in this affair, and the way you're behaving in it, make me realize that I'm not in a position to do for you what my former friend is doing right now. You said it yourself. You told him you have everything you could want. With me, you have love, care, and a family. With him, you have someone who, turns you inside out. I think that's what you said, I grimaced. With both of us, you get affection and attention. She flinched at her own words. I'm sorry I said that, but it's not true. It's just... She faltered, perhaps thinking about how impossible it was to convince me of what she had said, or perhaps running through a list of other things I needed to hear. I'm sorry this happened, she admitted after a moment, but I don't understand what you're saying. Another deep sigh. Things weren't going as smoothly as I had hoped. I guess that's how it always is. Listen, I continued. We live in three basic realities. First, you and I love each other in one form or another. It doesn't matter whether we want to or not, or whether we love each other equally. Love exists in one form or another on both sides. Second, we have a family, we have a history. We may even have a future. At these words, she brightened slightly. But there are two more realities. You have a mistress, and I no longer have any feelings for you, or for anyone else. You've worked very hard to make it that way, but I'll never admit it. Not to you, not to anyone else. In any case, it's no longer your concern. The joy that had appeared on her face at the beginning of my speech disappeared. John, she began, I admit that I don't want to lose you if it can be avoided, I squeezed out, sticking to the script. But I don't want you to be unhappy, and I certainly don't want you to come to me and try to rekindle a physical connection that I can't or don't want to maintain anymore. There's only pain ahead for both of us. So, I straightened my shoulders and braced myself for the worst. My staying in this marriage, my staying in this relationship depends on whether you continue your affair. She started to respond, suddenly tensing. Then her eyes widened in disbelief as my words sank in. This isn't funny, John. Okay, I muttered, because I've never been more serious in my life. If your feelings for him or me start to change, I'll ask you to talk to me so we can protect the children from the worst consequences of our divorce. Otherwise, you do your thing and I'll do mine. In fact, everything can stay the same. You can even see him more often if you want. Isn't that what you wanted, for you two to be together more often? The night I heard that, we both nearly died. You didn't even realize how close you were to it. After listening to the recording and looking at the photos, I stumbled up the stairs. It was the first and last confirmation of what had previously been only a dark suspicion. I was furious. I was devastated. I honestly thought I was dead. And you were sleeping so peacefully, so content, so happy with how your life had turned out. I felt sick. I stood over you and wrote the last chapter of our story in my mind with a clinical precision. And then you rolled over and woke up. You blinked, squinted, looked at me. I saw concern, genuine concern. Then you touched my hand so gently and asked if I was okay. When you asked, you sat up, and all that contentment disappeared. And you sounded like you really cared. I shook my head, pushing the memory away. She frowned, either thinking about what I had said or wondering what I hadn't said. Jim, she said, some of the things I said when we were… Don't, I warned her. Just don't. Stupid woman. The best thing you ever did was be honest. You must understand that. So why give that up? In any case, I can't bear the regret I'll see in your eyes if you start lying to me. I want you to start telling me where you are and what you're planning. But I don't want to know any details and I don't want to talk about it. The only reason I want to know when you're with him is because it's safer for all of us. She wrinkled her nose. I'm not seeing him, John. You're not serious. Her eyes slid over my face. Are you? Serious as a heart attack. Serious as a man's hand on a woman's throat. It's not the best situation, but the best situation is no longer an option, so I've chosen this one. You can take it as it is, or we can start talking about divorce. But if you don't want the marriage to fall apart and all your relatives to find out what you've been doing, this is the only way out. I'm scared. What you're doing, it doesn't make any sense to me. I smiled bitterly. Then maybe you understand a little bit of how I've been feeling for the last few weeks. But why don't you want me to stop? I do. Maybe the only thing I want more is to never touch you again and be around my children. But I understand what she really means. You're the one who's cheating, Karen, not me. There's no deception here. I'm not playing games with you, setting you up, or devising some clever plan. To be honest, I don't think I have the energy for that anymore. I glanced defiantly at my watch. Now you better go, honey, or he'll start to worry. She trembled again, and I realized she had suddenly become aware of how revealing she was wearing today. You feel like a fool, don't you? Good. Come on in and join the club. John, she pleaded, can't I just stay home, at least for tonight? I don't… No way, I growled a little too loudly, causing her to recoil. Honestly, I don't care what you do there. Discuss what a monster I am or how weak it is. Or entertain each other, I don't care. Sit around, watch movies, and eat ice cream if you want. But you have a date tonight, and you're going on it. At some point, I have the right to wallow in self-pity, and you can't be here when I do that. No way. I don't… She was stunned by my insistence. You're really serious, aren't you? Absolutely serious. And you're not going to divorce me? You still love me? I'm not divorcing you. I'm not leaving you. Unfortunately, I still love you. She looked at me, lowered her gaze to the table, and then nodded slightly. I won't pretend to understand, she admitted slowly, but I think I'd be a fool not to accept your offer, wouldn't I? I think most people would. She slowly stood up, her overly feminine figure accentuated by her dress. I turned away. I never liked staring at strangers. In the 3 months since her affair began, Karen had gotten herself into shape. Like most women, she had retained her gorgeous feminine figure, but in college she had developed a little extra weight around her waist that she had never lost. Now it was gone, and I had never seen her so slim and beautiful before. She spent a fortune on new clothes and even traded in her mother's old minivan for an elegant white SUV. In essence, she became a different person. Apparently, Carl had encouraged her to try a completely different life. Perhaps that was what he had given her in the end, the opportunity to stop being a wife and mother for a while. I didn't know or care. All I knew was that all these changes had changed her a lot. In fact, it was the SUV and how much she liked it that finally drove me crazy. You see, she wanted it because it was similar to her lover's partner's car. Both lovers thought he was cute and that they were right for each other. She bit her lip. What time should I be home? She asked uncertainly. Well, I thought to myself, you always came home from your girls' nights around 10. But that was mostly to keep up the lie, wasn't it? She lowered her eyes and nodded. Then I guess you should come back when you're ready. Something in the way I said that gave me away. For a moment, I couldn't hold back the sadness in my voice that I had worked so hard to hide for weeks, and I saw a flash of guilt on her face when she realized it. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. It's okay, John. I don't have to go. I don't even want to. You're going. I don't need your damn pity, bitch. What are you going to do while I'm gone? Ha! You mean torture myself? Or look for a way out? Give up and end it all? Don't flatter yourself. Oh, I looked around the room. If the girls aren't busy, maybe we could go out to dinner and rent a movie. Besides, I've already figured out what I'll do while you're out having fun. She nodded sadly, then looked at me as if she was afraid she would never see me again. It's okay, I said, just go. And if you're not back by midnight, make sure you text me so I don't worry. She nodded, came over, and leaned in to kiss me. I turned and kissed her on the cheek, and she obediently returned the kiss. Then she stood up, straightened her clothes, and smiled at me with a tired, unfunny smile. I feel like a teenager going on a date that his father doesn't approve of. Go to hell. Just don't forget to send me a message. And tell old Carl that he should be very, very afraid for his future. She rolled her eyes defiantly, trying to look carefree. Even she seemed to realize it wasn't working, but she kept going anyway. I won't forget, Daddy, she said, turning away. I didn't laugh. I don't think she noticed. When she left, I rested my head in my hands and focused on my breathing for a long time. I felt a grim satisfaction, the kind you feel when you wake up after a life-threatening operation that leaves you with a scar for life. It wasn't easy, but I made it through. I was sure that other moments just as difficult or even more difficult lay ahead of me. But for now, I allowed myself a small victory, realizing that at least one of them was behind me forever. Then, when I was ready, I got up and washed my face in the kitchen sink. Then I went to see if my daughters wanted to try some pizza. Thankfully, they were up for it. Chapter 2. On Saturday morning, Karen got up earlier than usual. I wasn't too surprised. Usually, during her girls' nights, she would come home around 10 and have a glass of wine in the hot tub before bed. It was a relatively new habit that I initially took as an unspoken request for some me time at the end of the day. Now, however, I saw a completely different, much more indecent meaning in it. After all, soaking in a hot bath seemed like the best way to pamper yourself. Plus, it helped you wash up before bed. This Friday, however, she didn't come home until 9:30, took a shower, and stumbled wearily into bed. She looked exhausted, worn out, and more than a little ashamed. And yet, even in the dim light of this sudden change, I couldn't help but study her clothes, her hairstyle, even the way she walked through the door. My eyes searched for clues that I didn't want to find and that I didn't care about. And it became my new habit, strangely similar to her own. It manifested itself in a series of questions, so small and unconscious that at times I felt as if I were drowning in a centimeter of water. Was the fabric of her dress wrinkled? Perhaps the strand of hair curling behind her right ear hadn't straightened on her way home. Didn't she walk strangely? The desire to assess the unaccessible was irresistible, but at the same time it was undesirable, and I felt bad that I couldn't control it. Of course, I didn't want to know the answers to these questions. I didn't even want to know what the questions were, but try stopping and see what happens. On Saturday morning, she walked into the kitchen in her robe and slippers, her expression determined and her eyes puffy. As soon as she picked up her breakfast, she got right down to business. Everything was just as I had expected. You caught me off guard last night, she croaked, reinforcing her words with a reproachful look. She slammed her breakfast down on the table. If you had given me time to think, just a little, I would have refused. I would have stayed home despite your stupid threats, and we would have talked about it. We would have talked. Like adults. She shook her head. You understand that, Prouda? Of course I do, you idiot. But what makes you think I want to talk to you about anything? I thought about how you might do this. How you might miss a chance to save yourself in a fit of selfish disregard. I still couldn't take my eyes off the newspaper. That's why I decided not to give you time to think about it. I did you a favor. I could feel her glaring at me. I liked it. Damn it, John, she growled, waving her arms. Look at me. Just for a minute. Put down that damn newspaper and look at me. I calmly put down the newspaper and turned my attention to her. I don't want our marriage to be like this. I don't want to live apart from you, with you telling me how I should spend my time. And, she leaned forward, lowering her voice, more than that, I don't want to do this to you anymore. I can't do this to you. It's not right. Well, that was a bit much. Do this to me, I snorted contemptuously. Oh, I really don't think you understand, Karen. It's not what you're doing to me. It's not like that anymore. It's what you've already done. It was. It's an action. The bullet left the barrel, flew through the air, and lodged itself deep in flesh and bone. I leaned forward. It may have, it may not have, it may not have, it may have. Do you understand me? Can you even hear me? We can stop discussing this because nothing we say will change what has already been done. You, my dear wife, have betrayed me. You lied and cheated on our family, on our life together. This will never, ever be a part of your story or the story of our marriage. It will never be part of who you are. And while it's certainly not what I wanted, you made that decision without my input. And now you don't like living with the consequences, but you can't undo it just because you discovered that your little fling has terrible consequences for your entire life. Stop, John, just stop. There were tears in her eyes. They must have seemed quite real. Does our marriage mean nothing to you? Do you really not care? It's so damn unfair that... Don't tell me about fairness. My fist slammed down on the table, knocking over a glass of juice that spilled onto the floor. I didn't even notice that I had moved. Damn it. Closing my eyes, I took a deep breath and imagined cool mountain streams. Then, after regaining my composure a little, I continued. If you look at your situation objectively, if you really take a step back and think about other options, then I think you'll begin to understand where these doubts you're feeling right now are coming from. It's not love, it's not hope, it's not concern for your marriage, it's guilt and fear. Do you understand? They're not based on rational thinking, they're not driven by any desire, and they're certainly not indicators of what you really want. I took a sip of coffee. The current situation is the best situation for you, and it's the only thing I have left, and while I appreciate that you care, you don't need to worry, not about me, not anymore. It doesn't do anyone any good. You haven't cared about me in a long time, so why change? I leaned over and wiped up the spilled juice. I meant what I said last night, Karen. I don't have feelings for you, and I don't know if this situation will become permanent. The mere thought of touching you makes me sick. So on this one very important issue, we disagree. I also doubt that I can be this close to you without squeezing your neck. I don't want to risk finding out. But I was also sincere when I said that I love you and I'm not going to leave. Of course, my feelings may change in the future, just as your feelings for me may change, but right now, the only reason I would leave is if you started using your fling to publicly humiliate me, show signs of being in love, or break up and try to force me to be with you in a way that I don't want to be. John, I want you to be happy, I insisted loudly. Can we at least acknowledge that this is the best and probably the only way to achieve that? No. I'm afraid that's true, she swallowed. I don't want to believe that. I don't care what you want to believe. I raised my hands, exhaled through my nose, and changed tactics. Do you realize, Karen, how happy you've been these past few months? Silence. Oh yes, I waved her off, smiling, relaxed, laughing at bad jokes, and listening to the girls tell you about their day. You were more cheerful and attentive than I've ever seen you before. I'm not lying about that either. When you start feeling guilty about having a good time at someone else's house, you show amazing flashes of deep care and attention. Maybe if you see it with your own eyes, it will become true forever. The girls will win, and you'll stay away from me. Go on. Do something for someone else, Karen. John, she stammered. I didn't understand. Of course you didn't know. Why should you have known? Your attention was elsewhere. She bowed her head. I didn't want to throw it in your face, you know. I swear I didn't. It's just, when I was with him, I missed you. All of you, I mean. My family. It made me realize... She covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to cry. I know. I took a bite of my food. But that was 3 weeks ago when his mom got sick. He flew out to be with her, and you didn't see each other for 4 or 5 days. I shook my head and smiled without amusement. You really turned into a monster, didn't you? I haven't seen you that angry since you were going through your second pregnancy. I fell silent and poked at my plate with my fork, but I didn't eat. And I don't think I've ever seen you this angry, ever. We took out all your anger on us for not being able to give you what we couldn't give you. And how fair was that? Now she was crying out loud. I didn't mean to... Okay. Break her, then help her find her way back. And don't you dare give her a chance to change her mind. The thing is, you were happier than I've ever known you to be, and it showed in the way you behaved around the house. It affected me and the kids. Your happiness made everyone's life a little easier. So why would either of us want that to go away? I want to be happy with you, she repeated insistently, sobbing. But we don't get to choose, do we, bitch? You are happy with me. Everything you do with him proves it. I'm so scared, she said, wiping her nose on her robe sleeve. I'm afraid you'll leave me. You know I won't. She shook her head. But why aren't you afraid? If we break up, if you do this to me, God. I decided she should be a little honest, at least about this. She had been so patient and accepting of all my little lies. She could handle one little truth. I'm terrified, Karen. In fact, I'm panicking. Do you want to know why? She nodded. I'm panicking because it turns out I'm all alone. Do you have any idea what that's like? No. Of course you don't. I put down my fork. For a long time, I thought I had everything. I was privileged, you know? Victorious. I turned away. Now I've discovered that I have almost nothing to lose, and I'm very afraid that I won't be able to protect and keep what I have. And it just so happens that you're not on that list. But maybe she already knew that because she ran out of the room in tears. I just stood there, another mission accomplished, and put the dishes in the sink. Then I went outside to work in the garden. When I came back a few hours later, wiping sweat from my face with my sleeve and looking forward to a cool shower, the contents of the envelope, were scattered across our bed. I had been waiting for this. I had even left it there for her, knowing that her curiosity would eventually compel her to see for herself how fully I had realized her infidelity. The tapes, photos, CDs, and DVDs. Everything was in plain sight. Now she knew. She was in the bathroom, turning on the shower. The girls had gone to a friend's house, so I didn't have to worry about them finding these indecent things that were now lying on my bedspread. I went to make myself some more coffee and left it there. 25 minutes later, she came out wearing sweatpants, a tank top, and a look of newfound insecurity on her face. Since she had rejected our marriage, she had developed a confidence that might have been admirable in other circumstances, but I hated knowing where it came from. In any case, it sometimes bordered on arrogance, and when that happened, she became difficult to talk to. And yet, not for the first time in recent memory, I noticed how beautiful she was. I looked at her with the casual detachment of a normal person walking through a museum. I saw her stunning aesthetic beauty and felt nothing more than an awareness of her existence. My God, she had aged 10 years in the last few months. Those years, gained through her infidelity, had been mercilessly stolen from me. I wasn't so blind as to not notice that I had aged significantly over the same period of time. I just couldn't bring myself to care anymore. "Hi," she said awkwardly, looking miserable and avoiding my gaze. Her eyes were red, and she ran her thumb over them as she entered the room. "You read the report," I said, handing her a cup of coffee and inviting her to sit down. She nodded. "I didn't know that. I mean, I know you said you knew everything, but..." She took a sip of coffee. "If it helps, it's precisely because I know everything that I decided to stay. If all I had were blurry photos of you sleeping with him, I would have done something very different. And by the way, it would have been worse for both of us. When I found out, I realized that you were still interested in us. Even though the returns for all the other investors were getting smaller and smaller, well, I certainly didn't feel like a good person when it all became so clear to me." She took a sip of coffee. "It was even harder to realize that everything I saw and heard, you saw and heard too. To understand that you knew about everything we did together, everything I said to him." She looked up. "You even knew about the car." I nodded. She shook her head in surprise. "And you didn't even try to stop me. You let me sell our family van with all our memories in it, even though you knew from the start why I wanted that SUV. "Oh no, I didn't know. You can't blame it all on me. I didn't know at the time. In fact, the fact that you wanted that car, that particular one, was one of the reasons I asked questions. You think I didn't notice it was exactly the same as Carl's? You should have seen your face when you noticed it in the parking lot." I clenched my jaw. "Like a damn child. At Christmas." She grimaced. "Like a baby. Seems like a good description of me lately." "No. Happy. Happy is a good description of you lately. And maybe that's all that matters. The rest..." I waved my hand dismissively. She looked at me skeptically. You don't expect me to believe you're not dying inside, John. God, it's written all over your face. Strange, Karen, because you didn't notice that before. In fact, you hardly noticed me at all. Fine, I'm hurt, I shrugged. Would it hurt less if I left? Or if you left? If you stopped seeing him, stopped being happy, and we had to go through all of this, the attempts and failures to rekindle our love. When you're not interested and I can't deal with it, would that save me from suffering? I shook my head. I have a wife whom I truly love and two wonderful children who mean everything to me. They are happier now than they have ever been. I can live with this pain if that's the price. You will never take my children away from me. I promise you. I will say and do anything to prevent that from happening. I don't like being the one who hurts you. Ha, that's funny. You do a lot of things, Kay, but only one thing hurts me. I'm in more pain than I've ever been in my life. And with every second that passes, the pain gets worse. I smiled. Don't make me hurt anymore. Sometimes I wish you'd just kill me. Isn't that pathetic? Sometimes I get so sad that I want to be killed. She didn't calm down at all. I don't understand. How can you be ready for a life like that? Are you kidding? I've been ready for a life like this, Karen. And by the way, I've been ready for a long time. But how can you just leave everything as it is? How can you not want to fight for more? I leaned forward impatiently. The value of this conversation compared to my plans was rapidly diminishing, and I needed to end it. Do you still love me? I asked quietly. Of course, she replied predictably. Then that's it. That's how it'll be, okay? She moved away from the table, rushed over to me, hugged me, and buried her head in my chest. I held her, letting her cry in my arms, struggling to resist the urge to throw her to the floor, then stepped back and let her compose herself. What are we going to do now? She asked sadly. We'll do what we've been doing. That's what we do. It feels like the whole world has been turned upside down. Let it be. As long as we're in the field of attraction, it doesn't matter. I guess so. She looked at me. What? What about today? Today? What are we going to do today? I mean, she shifted from one foot to the other. Do you have any plans? I wrinkled my nose. Her nervousness told me much more than she wanted to say. Well, I said, choosing my words carefully, I have a new book. I can't wait to relax and sit at home and read it. She looked pleased. Don't you want to, I don't know, go somewhere or do something special? Lame. If you're going to ask permission, at least don't be such a coward. Yeah, I lied, clenching my teeth. Just a quiet day, buried in a book. Then I turned back to the window and said the words so casually that all my strength drained out of me. The kids won't be back until after dinner, so a quiet day is perfect. I heard movement behind me. She touched my hand. Say you'll be here when I get back. You know I will. But that doesn't mean I don't want to hear it, she whispered. I didn't answer, just kept looking out the window at the quiet, familiar world. After a few moments, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned toward the silence. There was no silence. Well, thank God. A few minutes later, she came out of the bedroom wearing sweatpants and a sports bra, carrying a bag. Seeing that I was looking at her, she raised the bag and said, As soon as I realized you know, I thought it was silly to hide it in the car. I shrugged indifferently. I knew very well that she had a special bag for office romances and what was in it. We both looked at each other for a moment. I was sitting in a chair with a book I had no intention of reading, and she was standing there with her bag and an impatience that made my stomach flutter. She looked a little embarrassed and temporarily unsure of what to do, but then she smiled and timidly offered to repeat her silly joke from last night. I won't be late, Daddy. She brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Such a simple movement, and so incredibly beautiful, I turned away. Chapter 13. That Friday, the Bealeys were hosting one of their frequent neighborhood parties. I say neighbors, but it was actually a mixed group of families from the area around the nearest elementary school. You know how it is. You can be sure it didn't start with husbands and kids, but we had a good time anyway. We always went to these events, but this one was different. I knew Carl would be there. He didn't really fit in with the couples, but he was Tom Bailey's drinking buddy and never turned down an invitation to a party if he had a choice. Now I wondered if he used these parties to hit on his married friends' wives. I'd been trying to avoid him since I found out. He made it very easy for me by avoiding me, too. But I also knew that being around other people would be a nice change, and that the kids would have a good time. So, while it was very tempting to decline, it was also very tempting to cite the flu or an emergency and thus avoid seeing that son of a bitch. I decided to be brave and go. Besides, I didn't want him to think he could scare me off so easily. In a way, showing up at the party was a statement. Karen was clearly nervous. I couldn't tell if she saw it as an opportunity to get closer to her husband, to convince herself that she could really have it all, or just a chance to spend some time alone with her lover. I didn't care. But when we arrived, she stayed close to me, which was out of character for her, and I got the impression that she was trying to send a signal to either me or someone else. I shot her a few questioning glances, but she ignored them. Yeah, play innocent. But judging by the way she kept looking at me and keeping her arms close to her body, it was clearly intentional. The Baileys always made sure there was plenty of alcohol at their parties, and as the night wore on, the nervousness and excitement seemed to take over. She was drinking more than usual, faster than she should have, and it was noticeable. She was relaxed, playful, and noticeably less intimidated than when we arrived. When the sun began to set, she pulled away from me to talk to others. When it finally happened, I don't think she looked back at me even once. So I guess the reunion theory was out the window. Soon I noticed that she and Carl were hanging out together. It didn't happen too often, but often enough. And my clairvoyance told me that it was being done on purpose to look like a coincidence, which it definitely wasn't. They didn't do anything that would have alerted the uninitiated, but those in the know found it hard not to notice how their eyes lit up when they looked at each other, or how Karen laughed a little too loudly at Carl's jokes, especially when she thought no one was paying attention. The evening went on, and the drinks flowed freely. Several times when the conversation got especially lively or there were bursts of laughter, Carl would put his hand on Karen's shoulder, or she would touch his chest. It wasn't enough to give them away, but it tugged at my heart and caused an unwanted warmth in my stomach. My God, I thought. Is she teasing me? How can she do this in front of everyone? What the hell is she thinking? Does she really not care? Or does she not love anyone? For some reason, I thought I could hide all my pain from her and expect her to respond appropriately. I thought she was human enough to understand at least some of the truth. Obviously, I was wrong. I watched as their group dispersed, leaving them alone for a few minutes. They talked quietly, Carl leaned slightly toward her, and Karen giggled playfully. And then Karen did something that completely stunned me. She looked around the party, her eyes glancing over the crowd of friends with a kind of arrogant pleasure, and she laughed. Then I finally understood what they were really up to. They were playing a damn game with us. They must have discussed it beforehand, probably before I bumped into her, although she clearly didn't think it necessary to cancel the meeting. I could hear how intrigued they were. Let's see how far we can go if we pretend to be a couple in front of everyone, so no one will notice what we're up to. That's why Karen tried to stay close to me and maintain physical contact. It was a signal to her accomplice that it wasn't time to start the game yet, and a way to assure me that I wouldn't notice her antics later. Being around me was just a way for her to prepare for the game. I leaned against the railing, suddenly feeling very tired. My wife was using me as a prop to play a romantic game with her lover in front of our closest friends. She was using those friends as props too. Our friends. To both of them, we were just toys. Just people to be deceived. I looked around. These were people who had been good to us for years, much better than Carl, as I now realized. Why would anyone want to do this to them? Had Karen changed so much in the last 6 months that she thought this was acceptable? What had happened to her morals? What a stupid question I'm asking myself. I turned back to where Karen and Carl had been standing. They were gone. I frowned and scanned the party, hoping to find them. When that didn't work, I wandered around a bit, waiting to see them among the new guests. But I didn't see anything. I walked around again, trying not to look desperate in my search. Several times I had to politely decline attempts to strike up a conversation. I checked the backyard twice before entering the house on the pretext that I needed to use the restroom. There was nothing there either. Then, as I passed the living room and returned to the street, I saw them. Through the large windows facing the street, I saw them, partially hidden by the decorative foliage of Bailey's lawn. Karen was leaning against a tree and Carl was leaning forward, holding the tree above her head with one hand. They were talking, or rather he was talking and she was hanging on his every word. Then his expression changed, becoming more seductive, and he leaned closer. I watched as they kissed. A long, tender kiss, a kiss of love. A tender and frightening kiss. Finally, they parted. She said something to him and he nodded. Despite everything I had seen and heard, the words they exchanged when they were together, the intensity of their love and her obvious pleasure in it, nothing hurt me as much as what I had just seen. When people talk about lovers becoming one, they don't mean entertainment. They mean the tender and sincere connection I had just witnessed. My stomach turned. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I was overcome with painful emotions. How could they hurt me like this after all these years? After everything I had seen and heard? The obvious answer was that on some level I still loved Karen, despite everything. Once that love had been a blessing to me. Now it was an endless punishment imposed on me for incomprehensible transgressions. But even that didn't explain such a violent reaction. The kiss had hit me so hard as if I wasn't ready for it at all. It was as if I was reliving the betrayal, as if I had lost her again. I didn't understand. My thoughts were interrupted when I vomited violently again. There was a knock at the door, and Tom Bailey's concerned baritone asked, "Is everything okay in there?" I flinched. Great, just what I needed. Concerned friends. "I'm fine," I lied. "I'm almost done." There was murmuring outside the door. "Is that John?" a woman asked. "Does anyone know?" "I think it's John," she insisted. Brad Millins jumped up. "I heard someone was sick in there." "Alice thinks it's John," Tom explained. "His voice sounds strange." "Where's Karen?" Alice asked nervously. "Someone call Karen. He was with us almost all night." God, it had to be Albert Burke. I didn't notice he was drinking that much. Maybe it's the flu? It's not the season for that. Alice. "He definitely didn't drink that much," Albert repeated. And then, as if taunting fate in a schoolyard, Carl's light, humorous voice rang out. "Well, you know, some people," he muttered, "just can't hold their liquor." "I'm fine," I exclaimed immediately. "I'm fine, I'm coming out." Standing up and flushing the toilet, I walked over to the sink and washed my face. The voices died down, and a second later I heard a new knock on the door. A soft knock, with the indecision that such sounds tend to have. "John?" Karen's concerned voice rang out. "John, are you okay?" I took a deep breath, holding back the answer that caught in my throat. Then I turned, opened the door to the hallway, and looked her in the eyes. "The girls and I are leaving," I said sharply. "Right now. If you don't want to come, don't. I don't care. You can ask your damn boyfriend to give you a ride. I don't give a damn." Karen's eyes widened slightly and the color drained from her face. At that moment, a lot of thoughts must have been racing through her head, not least of which was that I hadn't bothered to look around and make sure we were alone before lashing out at her about her boyfriend. In my anger, I could easily have revealed her sordid little secret. "Well, don't expect an apology, bitch. You could have easily done the same thing with your stupid game. Damn it, you know someone saw you and rumors are already flying. So I guess you have something to think about now, don't you?" She must have realized what it took to make me that angry. She knew I was capable of controlling myself. She saw that I hadn't had much to drink that night, and she knew me well enough to recognize when I was furious. So I found it very telling that she didn't ask what had happened or pretend to be upset. I think she just didn't want to know the truth. Let me, get my purse," she stammered. "I'll be right back. Don't leave without me." Then she ran off toward the party. For a moment after she left, the house was empty. Everyone must have left to give me time to calm down from my supposed drunkenness. I fumbled in my pockets for my car keys, went out into the living room, and tried to calm down. Looking through the door onto the terrace, I saw Karen grab the purse she had left on the table and hurriedly say goodbye to the people she had just been laughing at. Carl approached her, trying to look casual but failing again, and said something to her as she passed by. A brief conversation ensued between the lovers, in which Carl looked slightly troubled and Karen radiated intense excitement, a bitter excitement that made her more animated as she spoke. Her face flushed, her eyes widened, and she made numerous gestures with her hands. If I didn't know better, I would have said I was watching a little romance unfold. Finally, nerves pushed Carl dangerously close to her, and he whispered something. Her shoulders rose almost to her ears, and she looked around, perhaps checking to see if the other guests had noticed her. No one seemed to notice the obvious. She looked back at Carl, took a step back, and he said something else to her, causing her to shake her head. He continued talking. She shook her head again. He approached her again, this time looking at her with the eyes of a hurt puppy, and said one last word. She froze, nodded slightly, and turned to leave. I watched him glance at her, noticing the confident half-smile that appeared on his face as soon as she turned away, and I struggled to contain my anger. The drive home was silent. Karen stared out the side window with an almost blank expression on her face. I wondered what she was thinking. Was she ashamed of her behavior? Was she afraid she had gone too far? Was she angry at me for ruining her fun? Was she angry at Carl for getting her involved in a game she now regretted? Or maybe she was just happy she had a good time and didn't care about anything else? As far as I knew, she wasn't thinking about me at all. And maybe that was fine with me. When we got home, the kids ran downstairs to play video games, and Karen took an open bottle of Chardonnay out of the refrigerator. She glanced at me as she walked past the cabinet, apparently wondering whether to pour me a glass. But I went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower, let the water warm up, stepped in, and just stood there. I didn't think. I didn't feel. I didn't imagine, dream, desire, or want anything. I just let the water wash over me, hoping that someday it would wash me clean. I let the water run down me and go down the drain, never to bother me again. Chapter 4. The next day, Karen apologized to me, although it was a brief and vague, "I'm sorry." It was obvious that she didn't want to go into details, even to find out what exactly I had seen or understood. Typical cheating mentality. She closed her eyes to the awfulness of her behavior at that very moment while comforting herself with apologies. After a few minutes of strained conversation and awkward silence, she cautiously suggested, "Maybe we'll all feel better if we go to the zoo tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I tilted my head, pretending to be surprised. "We're not going tomorrow." "Of course we are. You've got your days mixed up, Karen. Today is Saturday. We're going today." "No," she said patiently, looking at me angrily. "We're going on Sunday. We already talked about it." I shook my head, pretending to be desperate. "Jesus Christ, what are you talking about? We plan to go to the zoo on Saturday, Karen. Today. We've talked about it over and over. Don't you remember?" She blinked, her eyes darting around the room as if she were calculating something. She looked so nervous and confused that I almost laughed. "What's going on? Is it hard to juggle two lives when you can't control one?" She was right. We had indeed agreed on Sunday when we discussed the trip earlier in the week. But the more I thought about her behavior at the party, and especially that kiss, the less I wanted to be around her. So I talked to the girls about it when I put them to bed the night before, and told them that if they behaved themselves, we could go to the zoo a day early. Now Karen looked determined. "You're wrong," she insisted. "I'm sure we agreed on Sunday." I looked at her, allowing my irritation at her recent behavior to show openly on my face so that it could be interpreted as irritation at her silly forgetfulness. Then I turned and called out to the living room. "Girls, what are we doing today?" "We're going to the zoo," they both replied in a cheerful chorus. I turned to Karen with a weary expression. "See," I said, "today, even the girls know. So stop talking nonsense. Anyway, I don't understand why it's so important. It's only one day. It's not a big deal, is it?" She looked embarrassed. "Actually," she said, "I have plans for today." I managed to look surprised. "Damn it, bitch. I saw you make them up right in front of everyone at the damn party our friends threw. Or do you still think you're so much smarter than the rest of us that no one notices things like that?" But I didn't raise my eyebrows in disappointed surprise. Of course, I was relieved, although the little exchange between her and Carl had been pretty obvious, and I was sure they had agreed on something. There was always a risk of miscalculation. As far as I knew, those plans could be for Monday, or next weekend, or a month from now. All I could rely on was the certainty that they were definitely planning something. I hoped it would be soon. From what I could see through the window, I imagined something like this. "Are we still on for tomorrow?" "I don't know, Carl. He's really angry. Maybe I shouldn't—" "Don't do that. It was his choice. He gave you permission." Reluctance. Or maybe just guilt. "I shouldn't." Puppy dog eyes. "You're hurting my feelings, baby." "Okay." Pause. "Okay. I'll be there." And she left. Maybe those weren't the exact words, but I knew what I saw. An agreement, confirmed and respected. And to be honest, I expected her to honor that agreement. The last thing I wanted was to spend the day with her, talking to her and sharing my life with her. I didn't want to be around her. And if that meant she had to be with him, then so be it. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She was still waiting for an answer and probably expecting anger. Better to leave things as they are. I don't have to pretend I'm angry with her, do I? Plans? I growled, shaking my head. Are you kidding me, Karen? Wasn't yesterday's disgusting games enough for you? Can't you devote one day to your family before rushing off after yours again? She replied irritably, It was your idea. I'm just playing by your rules. Yeah, right. He had forced the idea on her. She would never have thought of it herself. But that was just like Carl. Anyway, she snorted irritably, it's only one day. The girls will understand. They won't have to, I replied sharply. Because we are going to the zoo, with or without you. Don't you dare, she shouted. They're my children. You're not going to start. You're right, I interrupted her. I won't start. I'm not going to change our plans. I'm not going to cut back on the time we spend as a family. I'm not going to live by your sins. What? She stared at me. Listen, mister, if you don't like the idea of me. I jumped to my feet and she backed away, gasping. To be honest, I think she broke off with a look of horror on her face before I even started to move. At least I was grateful for that. Perhaps she had gone far enough that her disrespect for me was boiling inside her, but not enough to make her even slightly embarrassed by it. For a second, we both stared at each other, both angry, both unsure of what should happen next in such a confrontation. Then pride got the better of her. Her lips curled, and she hissed, Fine, whatever you want. You want to spend the day playing mommy? I don't care. I'll find something interesting to do with the girls when I pick them up from school tomorrow. She turned away, throwing me a dark, confident look over her shoulder. Without you. And she left. I shook my head, trying not to feel hurt. After all, this was what I wanted, wasn't it? For her to leave, so I could have some peace and quiet? Maybe even forget about my problems for a while and enjoy the time with the girls. So why did victory feel as empty and crushing as defeat? I went into the house and told the girls that Mom wouldn't be able to go to the zoo with them, but we could go as soon as they got dressed and brushed their teeth. Since this didn't affect their chances of getting their prize, they didn't seem too upset. They pretended to be mad at Mom for half a second, then ran off to get ready. I couldn't help but smile. Such simple desires. Then I sat down to read the newspaper while I waited. During that time, I didn't see Karen or hear a word from her. As far as I knew, she had packed her things and left the house right after our argument. The thought that she might have already left and that I wouldn't have to watch her go brought me weary comfort. At least I wouldn't have to hear that damn bye daddy joke anymore. The sound of running water in the bathroom reached my ears, a sure sign that the girls had moved on to the final stage of brushing their teeth. I got up and gathered everything we needed for the trip to the zoo. I was just finishing up when they burst into the kitchen, full of youthful energy and joy. For a few moments, I enjoyed the purity of this beautiful, simple happiness. Are you ready to go? I asked. Yes, I replied. And you know what? Susie interrupted, smiling broadly. Mom's coming too. Before I could explain that Mom couldn't come with us, Karen entered the room, shifting her feet. She looked very guilty and was undoubtedly wearing her mom outfit for the zoo. Oh, I shook my head and turned away, feeling, what? Disappointment? Anger? Relief? I don't even know what I'm feeling right now. Hi, she said unconvincingly. You decided to join us. It wasn't a question. It's... She leaned over and whispered, looking around to make sure the girls couldn't hear. Is everything okay? I shrugged. There's nothing I can do now. They've already made up their minds. She flinched. I'm such an idiot sometimes, aren't I? More than you can imagine. I shrugged, not knowing what to do. My plans were ruined, and now I was stuck spending the whole day with her. There was no way to start over with the kids jumping around us excitedly. Karen had decided to stay, and there was nothing I could do about it. So why didn't I feel worse than I did? Thanks, Carl. You couldn't help me even this time, could you? Well, I said when the girls started to get impatient. There's no point in waiting. Let's go. The day turned out to be unexpectedly pleasant. I was sure that the growing distance between Karen and me would be like a heavy blanket covering every ray of sunshine. But it turned out to be the opposite. The joy of our adventure together momentarily pushed away the looming darkness. Of course, the bonds that once tied us together were lost, but they had been part of our essence for so many years that they were easy to restore. So, for a few wonderful hours, my family was whole again. The girls played a big part in this. They laughed, ran, enjoyed the casual comfort of knowing their parents were watching over them. But they didn't realize that this idea that their parents were a family, no longer existed. They believed that the world was still the way it should be. And thanks to the rapid energy of their vivid imaginations, it seemed that for a while they were right. Between Karen and me, the path was even simpler. It began, obviously, with silence. For my part, I was determined to keep it that way. But that, of course, proved impossible. It's simply impossible to draw children into the fire of freedom, choice, and space without communicating at least a little with your spouse. So, with a heavy heart, I let even the slightest interaction slip away. And that ruined everything. The question, where shall we go next time, led to the answer, we really enjoyed the rainforest exhibition last year. Remember? This brought a small smile and a flood of warm memories, and that led to further conversation. Maybe you've been in this situation. Maybe you know. When you have so much in common, rebellion becomes as easy as a happy memory. Before you know it, you're talking about the safest and warmest topic in the world. Those moments in the past when you saw your children smile. Strangely enough, I would say that we got along better on that trip than we had in years, even though the reasons for it were sad. I know it affected Karen, judging by how red her cheeks were and how she couldn't stop smiling. For me, it was almost the same as the fog of a new relationship is for you. And it's strange, perhaps inexplicable. But that doesn't make it any less true. Somehow, for a few hours, everything seemed new and sparkling. By the time we got into the van at sunset, I had had such a wonderful time that I hadn't thought about Karen's infidelity since the day I found out the truth. Could you ask for a better gift than one that makes you forget? They say the devil is in the details. I don't know about that, but he's definitely a master of surgical strikes. We were about 10 minutes from the zoo, driving home on the highway, when the slightest sound woke me from what was, frankly, the most ridiculous fantasy of my life. Karen's cell phone rang in her purse. It could have been any call, if she hadn't bothered to check it or answer it. She just covered her purse with her coat to muffle the sound and stared out the window until it stopped. That was enough for me to understand everything I needed to know. And just like that, as quickly as I had thrown my coat over the vibrating cell phone, the joy and lightheartedness were gone. The moment was lost. But that wasn't all. I suddenly felt sadder and more tired than I had ever felt in my life. Like a prisoner who has been told he's being released, he says goodbye and dreams of the future, only to be unceremoniously pushed into a room with an injection table. I focused on the road and tried not to think. I wanted this day to never come, so I could avoid feeling the way I did now. Karen and the kids remained positive, laughing and talking about everything we had done that day, and I responded to them so as not to give myself away, but my heart was no longer lying. When we pulled up to the house and closed the garage door, I sat silently while everyone got out of the car. "Aren't you coming?" Karen asked when I didn't move. "I need a minute," I replied quietly, still looking ahead as if I couldn't take my eyes off the road. "Is something wrong?" She frowned. "No." Silence. She didn't move. "Are you sure?" "I'm just tired," I insisted. "Please?" She took a deep breath and reached out to touch my hand. "Just a minute," I insisted. "Can I have a minute before I go?" She flinched, opened her mouth as if to say something else, but sighed and followed the girls into the house. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the weight of feelings I had been carrying around for so long. Maybe I just crossed a line and accidentally stepped over it. Or maybe I was just very sad. I can't say for sure. But as soon as they closed the door, I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and cried like a child. I had never cried like that before, not even as a child. But now I cried like grieving parents cry on the day their child dies. I cried as if I were the last person at a funeral. And it went on and on. I wanted only one thing, to stop, to breathe and feel that I was in control again. But each new sob seemed to be torn from deep inside me. When the sobbing finally subsided, I felt such relief that I almost laughed. For a few moments, I didn't believe it would ever end. Sitting down, I put my hand on my chest and focused on breathing calmly and deeply until I decided I had gathered enough strength to go into the house. I decided to go to the bathroom in the hallway, wash my face, and no one would know what I'd been through. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. No. I turned around. Our eyes met. She was standing just a few steps away from me, covering her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Guilt, pity, and pain fought on her face, and each of those emotions made me feel sick. Then she turned and ran back into the house. Damn it! Damn it! I punched the steering wheel, looked for something else to hit, found nothing, and punched the steering wheel again. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. Just one. That's all I asked for. Just one little thing I could keep for myself. Just one little thing that would belong only to me. She didn't leave that night, but we never spoke again after that. I pretended to watch TV, and she pretended not to notice that she was watching me. After the girls went to bed, she went out onto the terrace, took out her cell phone, and talked on it for over an hour. Chapter 5. Hi, Icebreaker said timidly on Sunday morning. Did you sleep well? No, I didn't sleep at all. I slept well. She took a sip of her coffee. Thanks for last night. I had a really good time. She looked at me. I'm sorry it ended like that. Me too. There was a long, drawn-out silence. John? Yes? Why are you doing this to yourself? Calm down. We've been through this. I know, it's just, I can't shake the feeling that there has to be a better way. Some way for us. I looked at her sharply and she fell silent. I got up, poured out the rest of my cereal, and left the room. I spent the next few hours doing chores and surfing the internet. Karen made no attempt to talk to me, and for a while I thought she understood. But after lunch, she took the girls to a friend's house, and when she came back, she went straight to the bedroom. I didn't think twice. I could hear the shower running. This would get her out of my life, and not because I wanted her. So why was I still tormented by these thoughts? Why was everything inside me twisting and tearing, as if it were caught between two huge spinning gears? I pushed the question away, banished it from my mind, and looked for a way to distract myself, because that really works. However, the situation turned out to be much worse than I had anticipated, because about 30 minutes later my office door opened and there she was. The girls are gone, she cooed, in a voice that could only come from someone who knew exactly how good she looked and was confident of your reaction. I thought you might want to be alone with her. Don't do this, Karen, I warned. It won't help. It'll only make things worse. She leaned forward. I'm not trying to fix anything. I just wanted to show you. Stop, I interrupted as she started to approach me. Don't you dare come any closer. Not now, and certainly not in that outfit. Her face tensed, but she ignored me and continued to advance. You know I can make you regret this. I slammed my hands on the table and jumped to my feet. I said stop. This time she did stop, and her confidence seemed to falter a little. Please, John, she pleaded, deciding to let the vulnerable woman continue what the seductive coquette had been unable to do. I just want you to be with me. I sincerely want that. I missed him more than you can imagine. I gave her a look that should have made it clear what I thought of that statement. Tell me, I said sharply, who made you wear these outfits? Because I don't remember you ever wearing them for me before, not once. She flinched. But I like them. I thought you did too. I stood in the doorway, turned, looked at her, and shook my head. She looked embarrassed, maybe even a little humiliated. Welcome to the club. There were tears in her eyes. I wouldn't touch you if my life depended on it. I spat on the floor for emphasis. You see, I vowed to be faithful to my wife, to share myself only with her, and I insist on keeping that vow. It means a lot to me. And right now, I looked at her with disgust. She's not here. I slammed the door. The next time I saw Karen, she was wearing sweatpants and sitting hunched over in a chair, flipping through channels. She didn't look at me when I walked by. Her jaw tightened slightly, but I guess I wasn't supposed to notice. That's fine with me, baby. For the next 2 weeks, she returned to the family member lifestyle that had served her so well at the zoo. She still glanced my way, letting me know she was checking to see if the ice was melting. She also didn't mention or ask to spend time with Carl, which I assumed was part of her strategy. I knew she had to be seeing him. I wasn't ready to think otherwise. I just wasn't sure how she was doing it. On Thursday of the second week, I decided to investigate. Right after lunch, I picked up the phone, called her office, and asked who was there. Who's calling? I didn't often contact her at work, usually preferring to text her if I needed to talk. This is her husband, I explained. There was silence on the other end of the line. Is something wrong? I asked. I'm sorry, sir, but Mrs. Sanders is out of town. Right, Mrs. Sanders. So you don't believe I'm her husband? Probably because she told you she'd be with him. Well, I wasn't going to cover for her. Okay, thanks. I'll talk to her when she gets home, wherever that is. I hung up with a dissatisfied chuckle. I pondered this new information. I already knew she'd spent a lot of time on vacation hiding behind my back while I was figuring things out. Apparently, she was back to her old tricks, secretly meeting her lover and trying to patch things up with her husband. But that wasn't going to work, honey. I decided she needed a little lesson. I did it quietly and discreetly. That weekend, I broke the news to the whole family. Guess what? I announced at dinner. We're all going to Disneyland. The girls immediately squealed with delight and started asking the most amusing questions. I tried to answer them as best I could, but Karen just stared at me across the table with an expression that was a mixture of disbelief, shock, anger, and horror. Disneyland, she finally muttered. Then she frowned and leaned forward. We can't afford that, John. We're already struggling financially. She said the last sentence too emphatically. I knew what she meant. I just shrugged. It's a blow, but everything's already been paid for and arranged. We definitely can't afford to go again, if that's what you mean. So we'll just have to make the most of this trip. I winked at the girls, then explained all the details. It was a big trip. We were leaving town for a whole week and practically wiping out all our financial gains from the last 7 or 8 years. It was the kind of mistake that would have earned an award, the kind that would make a financial advisor tremble at the mere thought of it, and then tremble some more. I even rented an apartment instead of a hotel room, so we would have a base with everything we needed for daily life. When I finished, Karen was even more stunned. I can't believe you spent all our money without consulting me, she whispered. What? Since when did we start discussing decisions that affect our marriage with each other? I smiled. Then I picked up my fork and shrugged. I think this is the last year the girls are still young enough for this. Soon it won't be magical anymore, so it's now or never. And anyway, we need to be with our families, so… At the last word, she turned pale. But that's so much money. Everything will be fine as long as there are no unexpected hospital bills, the cars are running, and we don't have to take unpaid leave from work. She paled even more. John, I'm not sure I have enough vacation time for this. What? I feigned surprise. She blushed and looked down at the table. I used it. Quite a lot, actually. I put down my fork. You've been with the company a long time, Karen. Surely you've accumulated enough vacation time over the years. She blushed even more. Actually, I've used it all. Or enough that it's become a problem. Not only that, but I'm starting to fall behind on some important projects because I've been out of the office a lot lately. Look at my face, bitch. Been out of the office lately? She didn't look up, just nodded slightly. I pretended to think about this information, then stood up. So much for being honest about when you see him, I hissed. You know, I really thought for a while that you were trying to be part of this family again, Karen. I guess there's never enough of us, huh? Then I left the room. She didn't even try to follow me. Sitting down in the living room and picking up a book, I couldn't help but smile. Mission accomplished. I'd be spending a whole week at Disneyland with the girls and a whole week away from my whore of a wife. And the best part was, she had brought it on herself. A few days later, Karen's mother came to see me. I'm not sure, but I don't think she noticed the distance between us. And if she did, she would probably have been happy about it. Her mother never loved me. In fact, I think she probably hated me. But she knew how to express it in a womanly way without saying it out loud. I would love to tell you that I never understood why, but she was a believer and I was a staunch atheist. So nothing I could say or do in this world mattered to her. In her opinion, I would never be poison to her. I wondered what she would think if she found out that her perfect daughter was having sex with me. Would she be stupidly touched? Or would she be too outraged to appreciate my suffering? To be honest, I think it would depend on who was around to see her reaction. Soon, she noticed that I had lost weight. Even men have to buy new clothes if they're going on a diet, John. With that, she rolled her eyes. Anyway, you should know that not everyone looks better when they lose weight. I'm not on a diet, I told her. I just wasn't hungry. Well, try to change that before you lose another size. She smiled at her daughter with disgusting sweetness. I'm not sure it will be appreciated. Karen very quietly prepared my favorite meal for that evening and spent the entire dinner nibbling her lip as she watched me not eat. John, she said quietly at one point, looking at the girls and choosing her words carefully. It's hard enough to get them to eat. and now their father is setting a bad example. I looked at her for a long time, 1,000 responses racing through my mind. But she was right. I sighed and tapped my fork on my plate. I don't feel well. I'm going to bed early. That should have calmed her down at least a little. At least I wouldn't be setting a bad example anymore. But she just snorted irritably as I left the room and headed for bed. Over the next few weeks, Karen tried several times to talk to me about the trip to Disney. To be honest, she was trying to talk me out of it. There was no pretense, no other motive, no other kind of discussion. At first, she repented and apologized for wasting her vacation, but as I continued to thwart her attempts, she became increasingly irritable and embittered. In the last few days before my departure, she became openly hostile, throwing her novel in my face and making snide remarks about how at least she didn't need to go to Disneyland to have a good time. I ignored her. For some reason, for the first time since her affair began, her remarks didn't bother me. It didn't take her long to realize this, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, her first reaction was outrage. I still remember the moment when she sarcastically remarked that she had spent the entire week with Carl, and something in my indifferent reaction told her that it no longer hurt me to hear about it. Suddenly, she fell silent. I looked at her, and she looked at me like a child whose father had just hit her and called her a whore. Then she ran out of the room just as quickly. I just shook my head and went back to my diary. I wasn't going to try to understand her ridiculous behavior anymore. I knew from experience that it was a futile exercise, but for some reason the image wouldn't let me sleep and prevented me from concentrating on the article I was reading. After a while, I put it aside and did something I'm not particularly proud of. I went to the cabinet above the stove, which only I could reach, and took out a pack of cigarettes. I had left it there 2 years ago when I finally managed to quit smoking. This action was dictated by a logic familiar to any addict. I simply felt better knowing it was there. But until that moment, despite everything that had happened, I had never felt the urge to get it. I was standing on the back porch when she found me. "When did you start again?" she asked. I took a drag. "Just now." I coughed. Not as good as I remember, but I took another drag anyway. She was silent for a moment. "Do you need something?" I asked. I wanted to apologize. I don't even know what I was. But I was acting like that, and it has to stop. I shrugged. "You know, I finally understand why you act the way you do," she said. "All this time I was so vain that I really thought it was because of me. I thought you couldn't live without me. And today, I lashed out at you and got no reaction. What I said must have hurt you. If the roles had been reversed, I would have died. But you," she said in amazement, "you just let it hurt you. And then I realized I couldn't hold on to you anymore. And then I realized you were done with me." I took another drag and threw the cigarette away. "It's all because of the girls, isn't it? You did all this because of the girls." I nodded. "And they were so happy. You protected them so well," she snorted. "You ruined your life so they could stay children longer." I muttered. "You're going to take pictures, aren't you? At Disneyland?" She hugged me around the shoulders. "They'll never forget this trip. It'll be such a wonderful memory." Suddenly, she burst into tears. "It's the only, way for me to survive. Of course I'll take pictures." But I didn't say anything else, and I didn't hug her. I just let her cry. Now she was someone else's problem. "Thank you," she finally said, gathering her strength. "Thank you for the photos." And then she disappeared into the house. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.